I'll never forget that winter up near the Beaufort, early 2001. Cold bit hard, wind never stopped. We were stuck at a small Navy outpost called Helios, running simple scans and drills. Nothing special. Then the ground started giving off these slow, deep thumps at night, like something under the ice shifting. Command told us to stay on task. We should have left. We didn't. And what we uncovered down there still sits in my head. If I tell you, I know you probably won't believe it. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But I'll tell you what I saw on that ice. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. I still think about that winter. Early winter in the far north, close to the Beaufort Sea. Cold that felt like it cut through bone. I had been in rough places before, but that stretch of Alaska was something else. Daylight barely crawled over the horizon. Wind pushed steady from the ice shelf, sharp and dry. The kind that burned your cheeks raw even under layers. We came in on a small Navy transport. Just a few of us strapped into the freezing metal seats, trying not to shiver too hard. The pilot didn't talk much. None of them ever do on these quiet jobs. The briefing we got back at base said temporary research support. Nothing dramatic, but the messes that brought me up there had that edge to it. The kind where the words say one thing, the tone says something else. I didn't question it. I just packed. Outpost Helios sat on a spread of old permafrost and wind-flattened snow berms, half-buried prefab huts, a small antenna field, and a heated tent that passed for a command shack. A couple of fuel bladders wrapped in torn netting. Nothing out of place for a short-term Arctic mission. But as we flew in low, I saw the sea ice far beyond the ridge, thick, layered, and oddly smooth. The satellite guys had been staring at something under that ice for weeks, apparently. Big, dense, and deep. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Ward greeted us first. Hard stare, sharp voice. She had that look of someone who had done too many Arctic rotations and didn't bother softening anything anymore. She shook each of our hands quick and got right into it. "We keep this tight," she said. "Weather shifts fast up here." I won't repeat myself. That was her whole welcome speech. Dr. Tostic. Leon Hale stood to her left, glaciologist, bookish, wide-eyed, and carried his notes like they might fall apart in the wind. He talked about ice layers the way most people talk about old friends. Knew more about the planet's frozen water than I knew about anything. He kept staring out toward the sea shelf like he expected it to speak to him. Dr. Aria Kovac was next. Marine biologist, sharp, quick, and already annoyed she had been flown out here for something she didn't believe in. She had that skeptical crunch in her brow even while she shook our hands. She didn't like that the mission explanation felt trimmed or incomplete. I didn't like it either, but I also knew better than to say much. Torres stood beside me, rubbing his gloved hands together to get blood moving. Sergeant Michael Torres, survival specialist. I trusted him more than anyone on that ice. Big shoulders, always calm, always scanning. He'd been full of jokes on the flight in but got quiet the second we stepped out into that Arctic wind. Jace Wyatt came last. Our corpsman. Quick runner, steady climber, good with rope rigs. He had goggles around his neck and a smile that looked too relaxed for a place like this. But he held his med kit tight like he knew the cold chewed people up. Two technicians met us by the cargo stack. Both quiet, both tired. They handled the radar gear and comm relays. Two recon divers rounded out the team. They wore thin expressions, like they'd been pulled from another job without warning. No one told them much either. Ward walked us through the outpost, pointed at the snowcrawler, the drill site, the radar tent, the emergency beacon. Every structure groaned in the wind. The whole place smelled like diesel and frost. She didn't allow many questions. When Hale asked again about the original satellite readings, she only said, "Command wants confirmation. That's all you need." But that wasn't all we needed. Everyone felt it. Something was missing. We settled into the routine like we always do on missions. Wake up early, check weather, test gear, run drills. The usual. The daylight came in slow streaks and faded early. We never saw a clean sunrise. Just this pale smear that shifted along the horizon before sinking again. The first few days held nothing strange. Hale had us skim cut studying the surface ice, mapping melt zones and compression lines. Kovac cataloged whatever marine bits washed up near the frozen shoreline, tiny crustaceans. frozen fish fragments. Nothing living came close. Torres and I checked shelters, confirmed anchors, inspected ropes and harnesses. Standard cold weather work. The techs did their radar sweeps nonstop, hunched in the tent with blinking screens and that soft electrical hum. Every few hours they'd walk out to adjust the antenna array. They hated doing that. The wind out there knocked people sideways. Wyatt stayed busy patching frostbite spots, checking hydration, making sure no one was slipping into cold fatigue. The temperature hovered around -25. Winds kicked up higher. Sometimes you'd look out and see everything blur white, like the horizon got scraped away. At night, we rotated radio watch. The generator hummed steady. The tent canvas snapped like it was irritated. The air smelled like burning fuel and old ice. Pretty normal for the far north, except for the silence under it all. Not peaceful silence, wrong silence. The kind that felt intentional. By the fourth day, Hale started acting different. He stood longer at the edge of the shelf, staring north. He kept saying the radar returns didn't match typical ice formations. Too dense, too uniform. Like a sealed mass, he said. Kobach pushed him to explain what that meant. He didn't. Or couldn't. Ward kept everything clipped and professional. She didn't seem surprised by Hale's confusion. That bothered me. She wasn't telling us something. You get good at reading people up here. You see the tension they try to hide. Her jaw stayed tight anytime the radar came up. We drilled a small test bore near the flag zone. Nothing dramatic. Just clear ice going down layer after layer. Hale talked through the formations, naming each one like a dated chapter. Some of those layers were older than any country on Earth. Still, he expected to find fractures or buried debris. Typical stuff. But the bore stayed clean. Too clean. Kobach started asking questions again. Why bring a marine biologist to a place where nothing swims anymore? Why had command picked this specific window in the early winter, when storms hit hardest? Why had no one mentioned previous surveys, even though the tags on some gear piles looked older than advertised? Ward shut her down quick. We follow our tasking. The rest is above our pay grade. I remember how Kobach looked at her after that. Eyes narrowed. Jaw said she wasn't buying any of it. By the end of that week, the outpost was running smooth. Too smooth. No equipment failures, no generator hiccups, no sudden whiteouts. It was like the place was holding its breath. I kept my radio on, even when off shift. Felt like the right thing to do. Sometimes, out past the shelf, you'd swear the ice had a faint vibration to it, barely there, like the start of a distant storm rumbling underfoot. But when I mentioned it to Torres, he just shrugged and said, probably the wind. But it didn't feel like wind. Everything felt underexplained, like we were missing the real reason we'd been flown into the frozen edge of the world. And looking back now, years later, I realized we were already walking towards something we should have never uncovered. We just didn't know it yet. The first sign something was wrong showed up on a recon sweep. Torres and I took one of the sleds out past the shelf markers, running a slow loop while Hale stayed on radio. Wind cut low across the ground. Pale light hung in the sky like it didn't want to be there. Another quiet morning in the far north. We weren't expecting anything except more snowdrifts and more ice ridges. But a mile out, Torres slowed the sled and pointed ahead. Something sticking out, he said. We got off and moved toward it. At first, it looked like old debris half buried in a pressure mound. We figured it might be drift from a distant research group. Storms throw junk around all the time up here. But when we got closer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't drift. It wasn't abandoned gear. It was wreckage. Crushed metal poles. Bent aluminum frames. Torn thermal covers frozen into the ice, like someone smashed a research pod flat and left it to sink. Hale's voice came through radio static. Describe it. Torres looked it over while I chipped frost from a metal tag. Letters scraped out under my glove. Short code. Not ours. When Hale heard it, he went quiet. Too quiet. That's from an older survey, he finally said. Not on record. I stared at the torn thermal fabric. Something had shredded it in long, rough strips. Not clean tears from the wind. Ripped. Pulled. And the metal supports, those weren't bent by simple collapse. The force came from an angle that made no sense. Storm could have done some of this, Torres muttered, but he sounded unconvinced. Storm didn't do that, I said. I showed him the gouges. deep scratches across the steel frame, set in pairs, not from tools, not from machinery. They looked like pressure marks, crushing the metal inward, like something grabbed it, squeezed. No Arctic bear or walrus could do that. Nothing in the region had jaws or limbs strong enough. Hale asked us to send footage. He didn't like what he saw. That mission was never listed on any logs, he said. I only know it because a colleague mentioned the canceled study up here years ago. Canceled how? Torres asked. Never got details. Yeah, right. He knew more than he was saying. Ward knew even more. When we hauled some fragments back to Helios, Ward met us outside the radar tent. She didn't flinch at the wreckage, just stared at the tags with that same locked-down expression. Where did you find these? She asked. Torres gave the coordinates. She gave the wreckage a once-over, then said, we'll log the find and move on. Stay focused on the current tasking. Kobach wasn't buying it. She grabbed one of the strips of torn thermal fabric and held it up. This isn't normal degradation, she said. Something tore through this. This wasn't wind. And why is there no mention of a lost mission here? This doesn't line up. Ward's jaw tightened. Your focus is the ice shelf, Doctor, not the past, Kobach scoffed. The past is literally under our feet. Ward didn't respond. She just handed us an encrypted message packet that had come through while we were out. Command says continue, that's all, which meant shut up and keep going. That night, the vibration started again, stronger. I was on watch, sitting by the comm gear, listening to the generator thump. The wind outside cracked against the walls. But under that, there it was. Slow, low, rhythmic pulses through the ground, like distant thumping, not steady, not random. Something deep under the ice shifting in long intervals. I felt it through my boots, felt it in my chest. I keyed the radio softly. Hale, you awake? Static, then his tired voice. What's wrong? You feel that? A pause. Then he answered in a whisper. Yes. Wyatt shuffled out of his bunk area, rubbing his eyes. Thought that was just me, he said. Felt like something big moving down there. We all stepped outside for a minute. The cold hit like a wall. Our breath froze fast. The sky showed a sliver of pale light that never fully formed into day. Nothing moved. Just ice and static air. But the vibrations came again. 2 long pulses, then 1 short. Kobach emerged from the other hut, bundled up and looking irritated. Tell me you all felt that too, she said. Ward stepped out behind her. She had her radio in hand, headset still around her ear. Minor tectonic movement, she said. Normal for these shelves. Hale shook his head. That's not tectonic. That's directional. It's too patterned. Ward cut him off. We are non-speculating. We continue operations. She went back inside like the discussion was over, but no one else moved for a moment. Torres just stared across the flat white landscape. Seals are gone, he said softly. What? Kobach asked. They were sunning on the edge 2 days ago. Haven't seen one since. He pointed toward the shoreline. Tracks stopped near the shelf and vanish. Kobach frowned. Seals avoid danger zones. Something pushed them out. The words stuck in the air like ice. We kept working through the next days, but the mood changed. Everyone felt it. The wreckage, the claw-like marks, the vibrations underfoot, the missing wildlife. It added up to something none of us could explain, something we weren't being told. And Ward? She kept getting encrypted messages. She'd step away to listen, face tightening, then return telling us to stay on task. No details, no context. We knew a storm was coming. Not a weather storm, not the kind you can see on horizon radar. Something else, something old and waiting under the ice. We didn't have the words for it, not yet, but we were already hearing it knock. The ice quake hit on a day that started normal, pale light bleeding across the snow. Wind cutting steady from the sea shelf. The usual Arctic misery. We were running another surface survey, hauling portable scanners out to the flag zone. Hale wanted cleaner readings before the next drill. Ward led the team. Torres and I hauled the sled with the scanner rig. Kobach carried the backup unit. Wyatt stayed at Helios with the techs, monitoring the radios and prepping a second scan run. Everyone looked tired. The cold does that. It wears you down even when nothing's wrong. We were maybe halfway across the shelf when the ground gave a low groan. At first, we thought it was more of those deep vibrations. Then the ice under us jolted hard. Torres stopped dead. That wasn't normal. Ward barked, "Hold position." But the shelf didn't listen. A violent crack snapped across the ground like a gunshot. Then another. The ice dropped an inch beneath my boots. Snow kicked up in a wave across the field. Hail shouted into the radio from Helios, "Seismic spike brace." The whole shelf shook, not a rumble. A full body lurched that made your teeth clack. A line split through the flat ice, racing past us, widening fast. I jumped back. Kovac stumbled. Torres grabbed her arm before she went down. Ward yelled, "Move off the fracture." Now. But the crack widened right in front of us. A long tearing sound echoed from below, deep and hollow, like the earth was opening its throat. Then the ground split clean open. A jagged fissure wide enough to swallow a truck tore across the survey zone. Steam and frozen mist blasted upward. The shelf dipped inward on both sides like it was collapsing into an empty space below. Torres and I dragged the sled back before it dropped in. One of the scanner cases slid forward and vanished into the darkness. I heard it clatter against ice far, far below. Ward radioed Helios. "We need immediate seismic readouts." Hale's voice came back strained. "I'm seeing a cavity collapse. Deep, very deep. This wasn't random. Something destabilized that layer." Kovac knelt near an edge, shining her headlamp down. "This is a void. A real one, not natural." Ward pulled her back. "Don't lean over. We don't know how stable this is." The mist cleared enough for us to see it. An enormous subglacial cavern beneath the shelf. Walls of ancient ice descending into a slanted chamber. Perfectly preserved layers glowing in pale shades of blue. Some of those layers had never seen daylight, not since before recorded history. A section of ceiling had fallen in, exposing a smooth surface deeper down. Too smooth to be random formation. Hale arrived on a sled from Helios, gasping from the cold air. He skidded to a halt at the fissure and just stared. "This is prehistoric ice," he said. "Older than the last ice age. This shouldn't exist here." Ward pointed at the smooth formations. "What about that?" Hale pulled a scanner from his jacket, flicked it on, and lowered it by rope. The screen flickered. He frowned hard. "I'm getting dense mass readings. Very dense. Organic pattern, 20 or 23 meters long." Kovac stepped closer. "Organic, as in N, body density," Hale said. "Not rock, not debris. Something with internal structure." Torres muttered, "Hell no." We moved to another part of the fissure where the ice had shattered in clearer slabs. From that angle, we could see into the chamber better. Something big rested inside the ice wall. Huge, dark, long, embedded in layers older than anything on modern sonar charts. Ward said, "Record everything. We're sending it to command." We set up cameras, probes, thermal units. The scanners pulsed back data none of us knew how to handle. Internal density consistent with preserved marine muscle mass. Tissue signatures frozen solid. No decay. No degradation. Hale crouched over the monitor, jaw tight. "This creature predates human civilization. This level of preservation is impossible." Kovac shook her head. "Nothing natural freezes this clean. Not even flash freeze events." Ward got the file packet ready for transmission and sent it through the encrypted channel. We waited in silence. Cold wind howled across the opening. The ground trembled in small aftershocks. Northcom answered faster than usual. Too fast. A short message flashed on Mort's screen. "Prepared to descend. Immediate samples required." She read it twice, then 3 times. Her face didn't change, but hers never did. Kovac whispered, "No, no way. We can't go down there. We can't go down there. We don't know if the ice is stable. That chamber is ancient. We could trigger another collapse." Ward didn't look at her. "Command gave an order. Command doesn't understand what this is," Hale said. "We barely do." Ward finally met his eyes. "We follow tasking." Then she turned to the rest of us. "Prep descent lines. Gear check in 15. Torres cursed under his breath. I didn't blame him. Every instinct said we shouldn't go down there. Something was wrong with that chamber. Something was wrong with what we found frozen inside it. But we didn't have a choice, not with orders that direct. While the tech set up the comm relay, we stood at the fissure's edge again. The creature's outline was clearer now that the mist had settled. A massive shape, trapped in ice like it had been moving when it froze. Its form stretched long across the ancient cavern wall. No one spoke. We didn't know it yet, but that first quake wasn't the real danger. It was the warning. Something under the ice had shifted for the first time in thousands of years, and we were being sent straight into it. We started gear prep before the sunline even lifted, not that the light made much difference. Out there, the sky stayed the same pale haze whether it was morning or afternoon. The cold bit harder than usual. It felt like the shelf was warning us to stay topside. Ward wasn't listening. Orders were orders. Torres and I laid out the descent ropes, checking every inch for frays, heated lines, reinforced hooks, emergency release carabiners. Wyatt checked med kits and rewrapped splints with stiff fingers. The divers helped rig the comm relays, running cable from the command tent to the fissure edge. The techs built a small repeater tower so our radios wouldn't drop out once we were inside the cavern. Kovac stood off to the side, arms crossed tight, watching us work like she was trying to memorize everything in case it went bad. I knew that look. She didn't trust any of this. Not the fissure, not the data, not the command orders, and not whatever was frozen down there. Hale kept pacing between the radar tent and the fissure, muttering about ice layers older than human history. He had that wild edge in his eyes, the one scientists get when the world stops playing by its own rules. Ward stayed stone-faced. She called out checks like she was running a standard drill: safety harnesses, heat packs, rope anchors, redundant lines. Everything was by the book, but everyone felt the wrongness humming under it. When we reached the fissure, the wind cut hard down into it, rushing through the hollow like air moving through an old lung. The ice shelves along the drop glowed faint blue. Steam curled up in slow breaths. The hole looked deeper today, like the quake had opened it wider overnight. Ward clipped in first. We go down as a team. Torres, you're second. Kovac, you're with me. Our narrator, you behind Torres. I'll monitor from topside, Hale said, adjusting his scanner. Wyatt stays with me until needed. Ward gave one nod. We get samples near the dorsal ridge and return. No wandering. No unnecessary delays. She said it like she could order the ice not to collapse again. We descended one at a time. The ropes creaked loud in the frozen air. I felt the cold through the gloves even before I hit the first ledge. 40 feet down, the walls changed color. Old ice, denser, clearer. You could see trapped pockets, frozen air bubbles older than recorded civilization. Torres looked back at me. Feels like climbing into a grave, he muttered. He wasn't wrong. We kept lowering ourselves deeper until the fissure opened into the cavern, massive, silent, stretching farther than our headlamps could reach. The ceiling arched in translucent layers. The floor sloped in uneven ridges, half buried under collapsed ice from the earlier quake. And there it was, the creature, frozen into the far wall of the cavern like it had been trying to burst out before the world turned it to stone. A giant shark-like shape, enormous, mouth open, teeth long and thick, the jaw frozen in mid-strike. Pectoral fins stretched out like it was lunging. Tail curled slightly to one side, huge and powerful even in death. The ice around the head was clearer than glass, the massive snout almost touching open air. Layers behind it glowed dark where its body was trapped deeper inside. Kovac whispered, "That's impossible." Ward didn't look at her. We stick to tasking. Hale's voice came through the radio, shaky. "My readings confirm the mass is organic. Tissue density matches preserved muscle. The thing has been frozen longer than the last ice age." Torres took a step closer. "Then how the hell is it this intact?" Kovac swallowed hard. This wasn't slow freezing. This was instant. Like something flash froze it in motion. I felt the hair rise on my neck. Nothing about this place felt natural. Ward pointed to a ridge where the dorsal line sat closest to the surface. "That's our sample site." Torres unpacked the heated drill. He set the tripod and braced himself against the shifting ground. The cavern groaned from time to time, long echoes rolling through the walls. The pressure was off. Old ice like this didn't like being disturbed. Wyatt's voice crackled through radio static. "Pressure readings at surface are rising. Slow but steady." Ward keyed her radio. "Noted. Continue monitoring." As Torres drilled, Kovac and I ran surface thermals. The scanner screen flickered from the cold, showing the internal lines of the creature. Teeth, spine, ribs. Kovac stared at the skull outline. That mouth is big enough to take a person in one bite. I didn't answer. The drill whined, biting into the frozen ridge. Steam curled from the contact point. Hale radioed down readings in rapid bursts. Density spike, hold on. There's a hollow space behind the creature, a cavity. That shouldn't exist. Ice doesn't form that way. Kovac exhaled slow. A chamber? Behind the body? Not possible, Hale said. Unless something displaced the ice when it froze. Kovac looked at me. She didn't say anything, but I knew what she was thinking. What displaces ice that fast? Torres leaned in to adjust the drill, but the bit jammed with a loud metallic snap. The sound echoed through the cavern. The creature's frozen jaw cracked. Not open, not moving. Just stress cracks in the ice around it. But it was enough to make us all jump back. A second later, the ceiling above us groaned. Then a slab the size of a truck peeled away. "Move," Ward shouted. Torres rolled to the side just as the slab slammed into the ground, smashing into shards inches from where he stood. Ice dust exploded through the air. The ropes above shook loose snow. Ward pointed at the exit line. "We're done. We're going up, now." I grabbed Torres's harness and hauled him toward the ascent rope. Kovac swung her pack over her shoulder and clipped in fast. Ward radioed Hale. "We're aborting. Fissures unstable." Before she finished, Hale cut in. "The opening's narrowing. Ice pressure is rising. You need to move." We clipped in and started climbing. The cavern groaned louder, long and angry, like the ice was shifting under some hidden weight. The creature stayed still, dead, frozen, but the chamber around it wasn't. Something deep inside the shelf was waking up, shifting old pressure lines we didn't understand, and we were in the worst place for that. We weren't even halfway up before the ice started acting wrong again. The ropes trembled under our gloves. The whole cavern felt like it was shifting breath by breath. Above us, the fissure walls tightened, grinding in slow, angry pops. Ward called up the Hale, "Status on surface." Static crackled, then his voice came through fast and tight. "The fissure is closing from cold compression and lateral pressure. You need to move. The readings look bad." Torres muttered, "No kidding." We kept climbing, boots scraping the wall, but the rope angles shifted. The cavern wasn't stable enough for a clean ascent. The quake earlier had peeled layers loose that were now settling. Down below, the frozen creature loomed in the dim light. Its outline seemed closer than before, though I knew it hadn't moved. The ice around it creaked with each shift of the cavern. The cracks around its jaw spread farther, thin white lines spidering around the open mouth. Torres looked down once and swore. "Thing looks like it's watching us." "Eyes front," Ward snapped. We reached a small ledge near the midpoint where the fissure narrow point created a bottleneck. Ward signaled for a stop to re-anchor lines. Her breath was sharp and fast. "Torres," she said, "get the auxiliary drill bit dislodged from your pack. We may need to free the jammed line." He slung his pack off carefully and dug through it. His gloves shook more than he liked. Below, ice groaned again. A long, low vibration rolled through the cavern, deep enough to feel in our chests. Kovac looked down, swallowing hard. Something shifting behind it. She wasn't exaggerating. The ice around the dorsal ridge pulse shifted, the crack lines widening, then tightening again like the glacier was breathing. The hollow space Hale picked up had its own pressure dynamics. Whatever was behind that wall wasn't empty air. It felt unnatural. Ward made the call. "We're grabbing one core sample and then we're going up. Fast." Torres stared at her like she'd lost it. "Ma'am, this whole place is collapsing." "We follow tasking," Ward said, voice flat. "That sample is why we're here. No one liked it, but we didn't argue. Orders are orders, even if they get you killed." Torres hooked himself to a secondary line and lowered back toward the ridge. Not far, just enough to reach the jammed drill bit. The cavern groaned again as he touched down on the slanted ice. "Make it fast," I called. He started working on the bit. The drill sight steamed in a thin column where the heated tip had carved in. The ice there looked wrong. Thin, almost hollow, like the drill had struck a pocket that shouldn't exist. Torres put pressure on the jam point and twisted. Almost. A deep metallic thump echoed through the chamber. Then the ice beneath the creature's jaw resonated, not a crack, a hum, like something hollow catching vibration. Hale's voice broke through the radio, panicked. "I'm getting a resonance spike. That cavity is acting like a chamber under pressure. You need to..." Before he finished, the ice under the creature's mouth cracked again. A long fissure snapped down the face, splitting the frozen snout. Torres jumped back. "Hell no. We're done." "Leave it," Ward barked. "Back up the line." He clipped on and started climbing, boots slipping from the rush. Then another sound hit us, a crack above. A big one. I looked up just in time to see a thick slab of sealing ice drop from the narrowing fissure mouth. It tumbled off the wall, smashing against the ledge just above our heads and sending ice shards raining down. A chunk the size of a football slammed into Torres' shoulder. He stumbled in his harness, legs kicking out. I lunged and grabbed his strap before he spun off into the chamber. "I've got you," I yelled. He grunted from the hit. "I can still climb. Don't let me fall. Move," Ward shouted. "Everyone up." We started climbing fast, pulling Torres with us. Then the worst groan yet rolled through the cavern. A long, low grind that felt like the entire shelf was shifting sideways. Dust and snow dropped from the ceiling like a waterfall. Kovac pointed up, voice shaking. "The fissure's narrower than it was 5 minutes ago. It's closing." She wasn't wrong. The walls squeezed inward. The opening above looked thinner, pinched by pressure lines we couldn't see. Hale yelled through the radio, "You need to hurry. The surface ice is bending inward." "I repeat, bending inward." Ward's voice cut through the panic. "No more stops. Climb." We pushed upward, hands burning from the rope friction even through thick gloves. The fissure walls scraped against my shoulder as I squeezed through the bottleneck. Ice chips rained down my neck. The ropes groaned from shifting angles. Torres wheezed behind me. "This place wants us dead." "Shut up and climb," I muttered. Below us, another avalanche of ancient ice dropped into the cavern. The ground shook. The creature's frozen body trembled in place as more of it cracked out of the wall. Its head shifted in the collapse, sliding downward several feet before slamming into a lower ridge and breaking chunks of ice away. The thing was dead, but the way it slid made my stomach twist. Wyatt's voice came through radio static, breathless. "The top anchor's stable. I'm lowering a second line to haul you the last stretch. Move." We climbed faster than we ever had in training. Adrenaline cut through the cold. Every noise echoed like a threat. Ward reached the upper lip first. Wyatt grabbed her harness and dragged her onto solid ground. She turned back immediately. Next, Kovac came up gasping. I shoved her from behind to get her over the lip before the ice could pinch down more. Then Torres and I hit the last stretch. The fissure walls scraped both our sides. Ice flakes filled the air. Our boots slipped on the narrowing ledges. Another deep vibration rolled through the chamber. The far wall collapsed entirely, burying the spot where the creature had been frozen. The body slid with the avalanche, massive, silent, dead, falling into a widening black abyss below. The sound of it vanishing was swallowed before it reached us. Wyatt yelled, "Come on!" Torres reached the top. Wyatt grabbed him by the harness and hauled with everything he had. I climbed last. Ice cracked under my boots. The rope jerked. The wall pressed in, squeezing the gap smaller and smaller. I dragged myself up, fingers numb, lungs burning, until Wyatt grabbed my pack and hauled me clear. Seconds later, the fissure mouth squeezed shut, shaking the ground as the entire cavern below collapsed. The frozen creature, the chamber, the ridge, the evidence, everything fell into the dark. And we lay on the ice, panting, listening to the shelf settle like nothing had ever been there. We didn't get more than a few breaths on solid ground before the second collapse hit. The first quake was bad. The follow-up felt like the whole Arctic shelf was pissed off. The ground jumped under us, a sharp vertical jolt that sent everyone sprawling. The ice moaned deep, like something old was breaking loose far under our boots. Ward yelled for everyone to spread out so no one went through the same fracture line, but half the surface was already spider-cracking in long white bursts. "Move back to Helios," she shouted. We tried. The shelf bucked again. A ridge behind us split straight down the middle. A tower of ice popped upward like a breaching pillar, then shattered into falling slabs. Torres slipped first. The ice beneath him dropped out in a sudden crack and he tumbled forward, sliding toward a new crevasse that opened like a mouth. He didn't scream. He just grunted once, grabbed at anything he could. His glove skidded off smooth ice. Ward dove flat, hooked her arm through his harness tether, and slammed her boots into the ice to brace. The rope cut tight, jerking both of them. Torres dangled over a deep blue void, swinging. "I got you," Ward barked, voice rough. "Climb." He did, boots scraping against the collapsing edge while Ward hauled back with everything she had. I dropped to help and grabbed the line. Between the three of us pulling, we dragged him back to the surface. His breathing was ragged and fast. "Thanks," he muttered. "No falling on my watch," Ward said, already scanning for the next danger. Kovac wasn't as lucky with footing. A chunk of falling ice the size of a pack slammed into her side and knocked her down. She skidded toward another break in the surface, her lab gear scattered across the ice. "Aria," Wyatt yelled. He didn't wait for orders. He clipped into a backup line and lowered himself halfway down the fissure, boots braced, body angled, one arm out. Kovac slid right into his reach. He snatched her jacket and locked his arm tight around her. "You good?" he shouted into her ear. Her wince said everything. Rib might be cracked. "Not dying." "Good enough," Wyatt said, pulling her up hand over hand until she was clear. The entire shelf shook again. We turned toward the fissure we'd just escaped from. The narrow opening had widened again, not clean, not stable, more like it tore itself open from inside. And then we saw movement, not alive, not conscious, just the frozen mass shifting with the collapsing cavern below. The creature's body, freed from the wall when the cavern fell apart, slid out of its shattered casing. Its massive head slammed into the slab at the bottom of the fissure, breaking into two jagged halves of ice around the snout. The whole carcass, solid, dead, ancient, tilted and started sliding upward with the flow of collapsing ice. It didn't swim, it didn't rise. It just moved with the destruction around it, like a frozen avalanche with teeth. The giant mouth still open ground against the ice as it slid. Chunks flew like shrapnel. Torres stared in disbelief. "That thing's coming right at us." "It's not alive," Kovac hissed through clenched teeth. "It's just falling." "Doesn't matter," I said. "It'll crush us the same." Ward pointed toward the ascent winch we'd set earlier for emergency haul. "Everyone on the line, now." The winch was anchored to a reinforced section of shelf 20 yards away. We sprinted across cracking ground, dodging falling chunks. The ice behind us thundered as the frozen monster scraped upward. Wyatt clipped Kovac in first, securing her harness quick and clean. "Go up steady. Don't twist." She nodded, face pale, gripping the rope tight as the winch pulled her skyward. Torres clipped in next. He fought to keep his footing as another blast of collapsing ice shot upward from the fissure. The creature's jaw smashed apart completely, spraying shards across the surface. One chunk the size of a helmet shot past my head and buried itself in the snow. We didn't have seconds to spare. Ward shoved me at the line. "You're next." "You go," I snapped. "You're led," I said go. Another huge vibration ripped through the ground. The frozen carcass surged again, sliding almost to the surface level. The sheer size of it made the ground bow under its weight. I didn't argue. I clipped in and yelled, "Pull!" The winch groaned but obeyed, dragging me upward. The ice below bent, cracked, and peeled as the massive body smashed into it. Torres reached the top. Wyatt yanked him clear. Then the ground under Ward split in a violent diagonal line. She staggered, dropped to a knee, and slid toward the opening. "Ward!" I yelled. Wyatt didn't think. He dropped the winch handle, clipped himself into a secondary rope, and descended a few feet. She clawed at the ice, boots scraping. Wyatt reached her just as the ground under her fully gave way. He hooked her harness and held on while the void swallowed everything behind her. "Haul!" Wyatt roared. The tech at the winch grabbed the handle again and cranked hard. The rope jerked, dragging both Wyatt and Ward upward. The creature's carcass hit the surface level in the same moment. The impact shook the entire shelf. Ice fractured outward in a spiderweb pattern, but the winch kept pulling. Kovac was already clear. Torres helped haul me in. I grabbed Wyatt's arm as soon as he got close enough and pulled him over the rim. Ward came last. She rolled onto her back, chest heaving, eyes wide. Behind us, the entire fissure gave one last groan, long and deep, and then the whole chamber collapsed inward. A roar of ancient ice. A thunderous implosion. Snow blasted upward in a massive plume, and the creature, all 20+ meters of it, slid into the abyss and vanished. Just like that. Gone. The surface settled in eerie quiet. The only sound left was our breathing. We were alive. Barely. And everything we had found was buried again, sealed under tons of ice and darkness. But that didn't feel like the end. It felt like the shelf had only just started waking up. We didn't get a chance to breathe. The shelf collapse didn't stop at the fissure. It rolled outward, pushing fractures across the surface like lightning under the ice. The ground shook so hard I had to brace myself on my knees. Ward stumbled to her feet, shouting, "Move!" Back to Helios. Now, Kovac clutched her ribs, leaning on Wyatt as they ran. Torres stayed close behind them, keeping an eye on the ground for sudden breaks. I stayed with Ward, scanning the horizon. Helios didn't look right. The antenna mast leaned at weird angles. A fuel bladder had ruptured and leaked frozen sheets of diesel across the snow. One of the storage huts sat crooked on a tilted slab. We sprinted as fast as the cold and gear allowed. Every step felt like the ice might drop out from under us. When we reached the outpost perimeter, another tremor hit. It wasn't as violent as the cavern collapse, but it made the ground sway. Snow dust kicked up everywhere. Hale and the techs were outside already, dragging equipment toward the crawler. "What the hell happened down there?" Hale shouted. Ward didn't slow. Cavern imploded. The entire mast dropped. "We need to evacuate this site before the shelf compromises." One of the techs pointed behind us. "Look." We turned. The fissure we escaped from earlier was sealing itself. Slow at first, then faster. Ice crunched inward. Snow collapsed over the opening. Within seconds, the entire site looked like untouched terrain. No hole, no cavern, no trace. Like the ice swallowed its own tracks. No one said anything. We all understood what that meant. Evidence gone. Everything buried for another 1,000 years. We barely had the generator shut down before we heard a distant thumping rotors. Not one aircraft. Several. Coming fast from the south. Torres looked at Ward. "We didn't call for evac." "They're coming anyway," she said, voice flat. Moments later, 3 helicopters cut through the haze. Not Navy standard. Matte black. No markings. No tail numbers. They flew low and precise, like they'd been waiting on standby, already warmed up, and only needed the order to launch. Kovac stiffened. "This isn't normal deployment." "No," Ward said quietly. "It isn't." The choppers landed in a tight perimeter around the outpost, kicking up ice dust. Side doors slid open before the rotors even settled. Men in black cold-weather gear stepped out, full face masks. No patches, no names. They moved with practice speed and zero conversation. 2 of them went straight to the radar tent. 2 more entered the equipment hut. One waved at us to stand still. Ward stepped forward. "This is a Navy mission. I need identification." The masked man didn't answer. He held up a gloved hand. "Stay back." Another pair approached us carrying sealed cases. "Hand over all recording devices," one said through a voice scrambler. "All cameras, all sonar logs, all sample containers." Kovac stepped in front of her pack. "You can't just..." The man ignored her and unzipped it himself. He pulled out her field rig and dropped it into the case without even looking at her. Ward tried again. "We follow a chain of command. I want to speak to whoever authorized this." "You already did," the man said. Those words chilled me worse than the wind. Torres bristled. "We have injuries. We need medevac, not a grab and dump." The masked man turned his head slightly, like he was noting Torres's tone. Then he pointed toward a helicopter. "Corpsmen will treat your wounded once on board. No one stays." The team moved like a cleanup crew. They collected every data drive, every map, every notebook. They even took the broken drill bit. Anything that could tie to what we saw. Hale tried to angle toward the sonar logs, but one of the men cut him off. "Not yours anymore." Then came the final step. A tall, masked official, rank impossible to guess under all that gear, walked up to Ward. He held a small tablet displaying what was clearly a pre-written report. He spoke slowly, like each word mattered. There was no creature. There was no void. There was a structural collapse during routine drilling operations. "That is your report." Ward stared at him, stone cold. Silent. "This is non-negotiable," he added. You will repeat those events during debrief. Kovac stepped forward, anger boiling through her voice. You can't erase this. We saw. The man cut her off sharply. I don't care what you think you saw. You saw ice. You saw collapse. The way he said nothing made my stomach twist. Then he added almost quietly, this is the last time you will discuss it. Behind him, the last helicopter crew finished clearing the outpost. They left the tent standing but empty. Even the generator cables were taken. Helios was stripped of everything useful. The fissure in the distance finished sealing shut. Snow drifted over it like the land wanted to hide its secrets again. Within minutes, Helios looked like a ghost site, like we'd never been there at all. The masked official stepped back and motioned toward the helicopter. Get on. We boarded without a word. The rotors picked up speed. As we lifted into the air, I looked down at where the cavern had been. Just smooth ice, untouched, silent. Whatever truth existed down there was gone again, buried under miles of frozen time. And someone clearly wanted it to stay that way. They flew us south without talking. Hours in that cold metal box, engines thumping steady, no one saying a word. When the chopper finally landed, we weren't at a base we recognized, just a gray facility tucked against a snow ridge. Concrete, no markings, no windows. They marched us inside one by one. The debriefs were rough. Long white rooms, bright lights, questions repeated in different ways. Officers who didn't give names. They asked everything about the collapse but nothing about the creature, like they were testing if we'd break script. Ward gave them the official version they shoved at her back at Helios. Structural collapse during drilling. No biological anomalies. They nodded each time, satisfied. When they questioned me, they watched my face too closely, like they could read the truth in my eyes. They kept circling back to the same points. What did you see in the cavern? Describe the collapse. Did anyone mention previous survey missions? They wanted to catch us slipping, but we kept in line. We didn't have a choice. We'd all heard what the masked man said. There was nothing to gain from arguing. By the time they finished with us, hours had passed. They held us there for days, maybe a week. No clocks, no sunlight, just meals pushed through a slot and more interviews. They told us the same thing every time. You misinterpreted the ice. Stress can affect memory. Kovac stopped holding back her anger on day 3. She kept telling them she knew what she saw. A preserved marine predator older than anything on record. Perfectly frozen. Mouth open. Fins flared. She wouldn't let it go. The response never changed. You saw ice, nothing more. She started sketching the creature on the inside of her notes folder. Over and over. Jaw, teeth, dorsal line. She did it so much she tore through the paper. Hale barely talked. He looked hollowed out, like someone had carved the excitement right out of him. He asked for access to historical freeze event logs. They told him there were none. He kept muttering about rapid freeze anomalies, old magnetic spikes under the Beaufort, ancient extinction layers. They didn't want to hear it. Torres tried to play it cool, but his hands shook every time the air vents blasted cold air across the room. He wrapped himself in the thin blanket at night, eyes wide open. The man who never complained about the cold now flinched every time the temperature dropped a few degrees. Wyatt stayed the steadiest, checking everyone's injuries, keeping Kovac grounded, keeping Torres breathing slow when panic crept in. But even he looked worn down. A medic knows trauma when he sees it, and this wasn't the type he could bandage. Eventually, they released us. No ceremony, no thanks. Just a quiet, escorted exit into an airfield hangar with our bags sitting in a line. No gear from Helios, no samples, no records. They made us sign non-disclosure briefs. Thick ones, full of threats hidden under polite language. Then they handed us each a sealed envelope. Inside mine, one line of printed text. Do not discuss Operation Helios, nothing else. We scattered after that. Everyone went their separate ways. Some got reassigned. Some took leave. Some just vanished into whatever hole they found next. Months passed. Sometimes I caught myself staring at the Arctic section of the map pinned in my office. That stretch of Beaufort ice just sitting there, quiet, pretending to be normal. But I knew better now. Ward messaged me once, saying the maps still keep her up. Kovac still wakes thinking about that thing falling into the dark. Hale keeps digging into old freeze events he's not supposed to have. Tourists won't talk about it, but cold gets to them now in a way it never did. And me. I still hear the ice collapsing, that deep groan, that weight sliding into a place no one will ever reach. People think the Arctic is empty, but I stood over something older than anything we know. If that was buried down there, what else is? What else is waiting under all that ice for the wrong drill or the wrong crack? The truth's still buried, and the world has no idea how close it came. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.